A question that often comes back is Multiverse. What comics do you read? Let's find out. Hello, true believers. Welcome to Multiverse. So, we have Marvel that are pretty much preparing the ground for Kang to become a major villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, I thought we could take a look at the Marvel's Avengers Epic Collection, Kang War. This is pretty much where I got introduced to the evil Kang the Conqueror and his various counterparts like a Ramatut, Immortus, and more. So let's get this party started. So this is the Avengers Epic Collection Volume 8. So obviously I'm reading this on Kindle right now. One of the issues with Kindle is that whenever you get a double spread or the equivalent of the double spread, it gets really small on your screen. Unless you have some way to be able to zoom in on your screen, maybe you have a computer with a touchscreen. Sadly, it makes it very difficult to read double spreads with Kindle. It's sad, but that's how it is right now. So it starts with Avengers 129. Got some really nice art by Sal Buscema and Joe Staten. They've worked together on the Incredible Hulk for a bit and on the Avengers. The story is by Steve Englehart. So in a nutshell, it starts with the evil Kang the Conqueror trying to take down his nemesis, the Avengers. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as much as I can. Ideally, I would like you guys to go and read them classic comics. And this would be also a great introduction to the evil Kang the Conqueror for those of you who are not familiar with the character. Although here we can see that the evil Kang defeated the Avengers, but somehow he decided not to take the Swordsman with him. Basically, he thought that the Swordsman was a weakling, not worth even worrying about. But the Swordsman would not stop there. It also was my introduction to the Swordsman. And later on, you'll see also another character. So the Avengers defeated the Swordsman on his own. What will happen? I'll let you guys find out. And also, it introduced us to a few alternate versions of Kang, like Ramatut. So this was also my introduction to Mantis. She had been introduced in comic not too long before that, but this is pretty much the first time where I actually saw the character. And you may recognize her from the Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Basically, she was added to the Guardians of the Galaxy cast thanks to James Gunn. So the Swordsman would have to prove himself to be resourceful in order to go and try to save the Avengers. And of course Mantis, basically the Swordsman and Mantis were together at the time. And then the story moves on into Giant Size Avengers number 2, and something that we do way back when you had the ongoing monthly series, but once in a while they would have some sort of giant sized issue. And here you would see that the story would continue in Giant Sized Avengers number 2. And we would see the return of Hawkeye to the Avengers. Here we got some artwork by Dave Cockrum. His most famous comic run is the All New All Different X-Men, which gave us the new X-Men. So of course, it starts with Hawkeye doing what Hawkeye does, stopping the bad guys, with a whole bunch of trick arrows. But then of course he learns about the trouble that the Avengers are facing, and way back when they would try to treat every comic as if it was somebody's first comic, so it wasn't rare to get a sort of recap of what happened before at the start of an issue. So Hawkeye would have to team up with his old mentor, the Swordsman. Originally the Swordsman is pretty much the one who trained Hawkeye, although later on they created a new character called the Trickshot, who was the true mentor of Hawkeye. And the Swordsman started in the Avengers as an evil villain who tried to infiltrate the Avengers and then take them down from the inside. Of course, things went wrong and he had to go on the run. But later on, he was able to pretty much redeem himself and try to be an Avenger once more. And of course, Hawkeye does have reservation about working alongside the Ramatut. Basically, Ramatut started as an evil villain for the Fantastic Four. And eventually, he does become Kang the Conqueror. So obviously, Hawkeye doesn't really want to work with the guy. And here we got a pretty funky panel, pretty much giving us a history of Kang. And also, at some point it was believed that Kang was another version of Doctor Doom. Then there was also the Scarlet Centurion. Of course, our friend Ramatut, Kang himself. And I'm surprised we don't see Immortus here, but we'll see him in a future comic. At the time they were building up the story that the Mantis was pretty much what was called the Celestial Madonna, which is how she kind of ends up with the Guardians of the Galaxy at some point. Here we have Avengers 130, where the Avengers are fighting the evil Crimson Dynamo, Titanium Man, the Radioactive Man, and the Slasher. I'm not sure if we ever saw the Slasher before. He looks like solely a one-shot villain, a villain that was created for this one issue and that was it, as opposed to the others who were pretty much villains of Iron Man before. Oh, spoiler alert. So here we're back with Sal Buscema and Joe Staten on the artwork. And we have Hawkeye pretty much coming back full time to the team. And we have Mantis who kind of wants to leave the team, but obviously she decides not to. There's also a bit of drama with the Vision at the time. The Vision wasn't quite with Scarlet Witch just yet at the time. And they tried to make pretty much this triangle between the Vision, Mantis, and Scarlet Witch. I wonder if they'll try to do something like that in the movies. We'll have to wait and see for that. And some of you guys may recognize Agatha Harkness, which would pretty much become the mentor for Scarlet Witch, at least for a bit. And yeah, I did use the evil mentor word to describe Agatha Harkness. Way back when, a mentor had nothing to do with men. There's people who seems to go crazy whenever the word mentor is used, because there's men into the word. The word has nothing to do with men. Mentor was the name of the teacher of Telemaque in the Odysseus. Telemaque was Odysseus' son, and his teacher was mentor, which then became the word to describe an older veteran that is mentoring a younger person. In this case, Agatha Harkness is the older mentor, and she's going to train the younger Scarlet Witch. And here we have the Slasher doing some evil shenanigans. And here we have the Titanium Man, Crimson Dynamo, and the evil Radioactive Man. Of course, Iron Man wants to interfere because these are some of his evil villains, but Thor has to remind them that they are in foreign land, they cannot do as they please. And of course, let the battle begin! Although, it ends pretty quickly. I love this panel. But then the evil Slasher decides to turn the Titanium Man, Crimson Dynamo, and Radioactive Man against the Avengers. Then once more, there will be battle. And next we have Avengers 131 with the Legion of the Unliving. I love that comic. Pretty much focuses on Mantis, and already way back when, they were trying to give us some strong female characters. It's a bit weird when you see modern creators claiming that there never was any strong female characters before, and Mantis was pretty much one of those. There's this weird belief that there was nothing before the past 5 years, and everything was created only in the past 5 years, when there actually was plenty of strong female characters way back when. You have to wonder if modern creators ever read classic comics, and the most obvious answer is probably not. Either they never read classic comics and are pretty ignorant about what happened before, or they're just being dishonest. Either way, it doesn't change that very often what they claim is not very true. So Mantis dispatches of her evil attacker, and she did not even need the Avengers to help her out. And also way back when at the time, we had Steve Rogers, who for a while decided that he didn't really want to be Captain America anymore, so he became Nomad. This was the first time I actually encountered Nomad. At the time, I had no idea he was supposed to be Captain America, something I realized a bit later as I read the story. And of course, here we have our friend Kang fighting himself against the evil Ramatut. And fate would decide that Kang, Ramatut, and Immortus would pretty much end up crossing paths. And for some reason, Immortus decided to side with Kang and imprison Ramatut. And they decide to have a funky idea. They decide to summon a whole bunch of dead people to fight the Avengers. So they summon the Frankenstein monster. And the character is the Frankenstein monster, not Frankenstein. Sadly, there's a lot of people who don't seem to realize that Frankenstein is the name of the doctor, not the name of the monster. Sadly, in recent years, they pretty much gave up on that and decided to just call the monster Frankenstein, as opposed to calling him Frankenstein's monster. Here we have Wonder Man. It was my first exposure to Wonder Man. Loved it. The Human Torch, the original Human Torch from the 40s. It was a bit strange because he was a robot, so how could he really be dead? And strangely enough, in a future issue of West Coast Avengers, it turns out he wasn't really dead after all. We have Midnight from the pages of Master of Kung Fu. The Ghost, I'm not sure where the Ghost comes from. They do mention he comes from Silver Surfer number 8 and 9. And the evil Baron Zemo. And together, they would form the Legion of the Unliving. Avengers, beware. But of course, Kang being Kang, he had to betray Immortus, of course. And sadly, our friend the Nomad decides to leave the Avengers. So he just came by, had a quick chat with them, and then went back to continue his adventures within the pages of the Captain America comic. But then, zap! The Avengers would get captured. I love this cover. I think I did an homage of it once or twice. Love it. So obviously this is Avengers 132. Great splash page. Love it. So we have the Legion of the Unliving. We'll go fight the Avengers within Kang's castle in Limbo. So this would be the first of many encounters between Wonder Man and the Vision. In a nutshell, the Vision's brain pattern were modeled after Wonder Man. When Wonder Man died, they used his brain pattern to create the Vision. It's a plot point we would see from time to time. We saw it in future stories when James Shooter and George Perez were working on Avengers, and then later on with Kurt Busiek and also George Perez. There's also John Byrne, who played with that idea a bit when he pretty much reinvented the Vision with his Vision Quest storyline in the West Coast Avengers. And sadly, these being dead creatures, kinda hard for the Avengers to be a match for them. Ah, poor Vision. What's gonna happen? Sadly, the story would continue in Giant-Sized Avengers number 3, which for some reason was not translated in my neck of the woods. So sadly, it took me 15, if not 20 years to finally get the rest of the story. And here once more, we have Dave Cockrum pretty much pitching in for the artwork. We had a few nice bits, like Thor going toe-to-toe against Wonder Man, with Hawkeye, of course, being up to a whole bunch of shenanigans. And in the end, once he was immobilized, I tried to use some sneaky old-fashioned tricks to try to prevail. And of course, by the end of the story, Immortus would send the Legion of the Unliving back where they're supposed to be. And next we have Avengers 133. So at the time, Scarlet Witch had a hard time controlling her powers, and we had Agatha Harkness, who was helping train her. At the time, they had not really defined chaos magic. She was just doing some sort of minor magic. And of course, we have a bit of the aftermath of the Kang and Mortis storyline. But it would kickstart pretty much a bit of a storyline to explore the origin of the Vision. So of course, Immortus sends the Avengers back where they're supposed to be. And here we have the introduction of Moondragon. I had seen her in the pages of Iron Man. She did seem to be like some sort of evil villain. But later on, she kind of sort of joined the Avengers, at least for a bit. So here we have the Vision. It was pretty much in a quest to explore his origins. And the tale, of course, called The Origin of Vision. So the origin of the Vision pretty much starts with the origin of the Human Torch. And the Human Torch way back when pretty much became the first Marvel hero. As for the Avengers themselves, they pretty much went on their separate ways in their case, they were pretty much exploring the origin of Mantis. Then we move on to Avengers 134. So we have the Avengers continuing to look into the origins of Mantis. I'm going to skip quite a bit so that you guys can explore that on your own. But here we're back to the origin of Vision. So basically they had this parallel structure where we would see the origin of Vision, the origin of Mantis. And early on, the origin of Vision was pretty much the origin of the Human Torch. And eventually the Human Torch was found by the Mad Thinker, who used them one last time to fight the Fantastic Four. But once more, the Human Torch was left for dead, only to be found by the evil Ultron. At the time, it was Ultron 5. And then we continue in Avengers 135. Here we have a guest art by George Tuska. So we have Ultron finding the Human Torch, and we also end up with a bit of an origin story for Ultron. In a nutshell, it was created by Henry Pym, and he became one of the Avengers' deadliest villains. For some reason, Ultron decided to make his own creation, so he took the body of the Human Torch in order to be able to do that. And here we have pretty much Moondragon sort of joining the Avengers, and somehow the whole origin story with Mantis is somehow linked to the evil Thanos. The name is actually Thanos, not Thanos. I've seen people call him Thanos, and then they blamed Disney for changing the name to Thanos, or that Disney had nothing to do with calling him Thanos. The name comes from the Greek name Thanatos. So Thanatos, Thanos, there we go. But basically they linked Mantis' origin to the Eternals that live on Titan. And Moondragon is linked to all that somehow. And here we're back to the origin of the Vision with the Human Torch. Somehow Ultron needed the help of the original creator of the Human Torch, so he went to get him. And that is pretty much how they reinvented the Human Torch into Vision. But of course somehow he was still the Human Torch, so he tried to fight off the evil Ultron. But somehow Ultron prevailed, and then he was able to reprogram him into the Vision. And then the story continues into Giant-Sized Avengers number 4. Here we have artwork by Don Heck. Don Heck was pretty much a classic Avengers artist from way back when. He also was an Iron Man artist, and probably something else I failed to mention. So again, in this issue, we continue to explore the origin of Vision. We even have a bit of a recap of what we just saw in the previous issues. I skipped quite a bit because basically it leads to some important event with Swordsman and Mantis, and with Vision and Scarlet Witch. And next we have Avengers 136, which sadly was a reprint of Amazing Adventures number 12, and it is not included in this volume. Basically, we had the origin of the, not quite the origin of the Beast, but how the Beast became the Blue-Furred Beast. It was a pretty cool story. Which brings us to Avengers 137. Basically, they gave us the origin of the Blue Beast, because with Avengers 137, the Blue Beast would try to join the Avengers. We have the Avengers looking out for new members, and obviously, if you read any Avengers comics, you probably know that the Beast was in Avengers at some point, so it's not really a spoiler. Or it's a minor spoiler, I would say. And we had the Vision and Scarlet Witch on vacation, which I have to admit was kind of strange to see Vision without his costume. And we have Yellow Jacket and the Wasp returning to the Avengers. Though at the time there was a bit of conflict between Yellow Jacket and Hawkeye, which would make Hawkeye leave. We would see him in the Defenders for a while, but Hawkeye would be back someday. And of course, we have the Beast who makes his entrance and who wants to join the Avengers. Pretty much explains that he used to be an X-Man, but now he wants to be an Avenger. And here we have a bit of a recap of what happened in the Amazing Adventure comic. In a nutshell, the Beast had the big feet. He tried to take a formula to try to correct his appearance, and it did correct his appearance, but not in the way he thought. But then later on he would learn how to disguise himself to try to pass as human, but eventually he would pretty much give up on that and pretty much accept that from now on he was a blue-furred beast. And of course, at this very time, someone decides to attack the Avengers. So of course, Avengers, assemble! But Beast, being the new guy, had to prove himself somehow, so he manages to defuse the situation. And next we have Avengers 138. So the evil mystery villain attacking the Avengers has been revealed. And again, Beast would manage to prove his worth and prove that he was an Avengers. And next we have Avengers 139. So sadly the Wasp was hurt, and it drives a Yellow Jacket a little bit crazy. And that is when the evil Whirlwind decided to make an appearance. The Whirlwind was a villain for Giant Man and the Wasp way back when. I guess he tried to use this opportunity to try to capture the Wasp, which sadly didn't quite work out. And of course, Yellow Jacket would face the Whirlwind once more. And of course, third time's the charm. But that third time, he would have the Beast helping him out. And next we have Avengers 140. And sadly, there's something wrong with Yellow Jacket. Beast wants to get some help, but they have to get some serum into his heart. So the Vision will have to try and do that. We have a pretty funky story where the Vision has to go into Yellow Jacket. And next we have Avengers 141, the Squadron Sinister. Enough said. And here we have a pretty historic moment, the first Avenger issue by George Perez. This would be pretty much the first of some pretty awesome Avengers comic, drawn masterfully by George Perez himself. Although he would have various inkers, early on he would have Vince Colletta, which was a mixed bag. When it comes to inkers, Vince Colletta was a mixed bag. Sometimes he did seem to improve the work of some artists, sometimes not so much. Also, Perez would be pretty good at drawing the Beast somehow, but it was always a treat to see the Beast drawn by George Perez. And we have Captain America returning to the Avengers. And we have Yellow Jacket and the Wasp sadly ending up in the hospital together. But we do have the return of the Vision and Scarlet Witch. We have the return of Captain America. Life was good. Too often we see writers trying to use some weird alternate characters for the Avengers. But it's always nice to see the return of classic Avengers like Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Vision, and the Scarlet Witch. Of course, obviously, if people didn't try some new characters once in a while, we would not have the Blue-Furred Beast as one of our favorite Avengers. So it's a mixed bag. It's kind of nice when they have some new members, but it's always nice also to have some classic Avengers. And here we have the introduction of Patsy Walker, which would set up the stage for something else in the future. Oh, and now we're getting back into the Immortus Kang storyline. So of course, the evil Kang is back once more. Immortus is trying to kind of stop him, and he went to get the help of the Avengers, in this case Thor and Moondragon. As for the Avengers, now they have to fight the Squadron Supreme. What, I hear you say? Wasn't it supposed to be the Squadron Sinister? Yes and no. The Squadron Sinister was a group of evil villains from the Avengers Earth, but the Squadron Supreme was their alternate counterpart from a different Earth. The Squadron Supreme technically were the heroes of their own Earth. Imagine they were basically the Justice League of their own Earth. The Squadron Sinister was an evil version of the Avengers Earth, so that the Avengers could fight the Justice League. But here we have what is pretty much the Justice League proper in the Marvel Universe, and now they are facing off against the Avengers. George Perez and Steve Englehart have always been big Justice League fans, and basically they wanted to have the Avengers versus the Justice League, and now here we are. And it doesn't end well for the Avengers. And of course, Thor and Moondragon end up somewhere in the past with the evil Immortus. And here we have Avengers 142, which is a fun bit of a comic. Basically, the Thor, Moondragon, and Immortus went back into the Old West. I'm not sure why Iron Man is in the cover. Iron Man is not supposed to be there, but what can you do? Way back when Gil Kane was doing pretty much all the covers for the Marvel Comics, so I guess no one told him that the Iron Man wasn't supposed to be in the Wild West. So here we have a fun bit where we can see Rawhide Kid, Two Gun Kid, Ghost Rider. This here is the original Ghost Rider. Eventually, he was renamed the Phantom Rider, so that Ghost Rider could actually be the guy with the flaming skull on the bike. But originally, this was Ghost Rider. And of course, some sort of misunderstanding happens until they settle the whole thing and decide to all leave together. And when they get into town, they see our friend Hawkeye, who somehow ended up there. Basically, he explains that he used Doctor Doom's time machine to go back in the past, crossed path with Kang, and somehow ended up in the Wild West. Or Kang also ended up here, and technically Kang is sort of trying to conquer the past in order to conquer the future, so now the Avengers have to stop him. And here we have the Avengers who are captured by the evil Squadron Sinister, Squadron Supreme. So of course the Avengers are captured, the evil bad guys gloat over the Avengers' defeat, and we go back to the Old West, and of course, there has to be a great train robbery. There has to be. There's no choice. And next we have Avengers 143. So again, we're still in the Old West, and basically we will alternate between the Old West and modern times, so that we can see what happens to the Avengers in the Old West, and the Avengers that remained in modern times. And of course, when the Avengers faces a bad guy, you have to make the call, Avengers assemble. Back in modern days, the Avengers have to figure out a way to be able to escape their traps, which of course, they do. Back in the Old West, Kang can summon pretty much any creature from anywhere in time, so he summoned the evil huge beast to fight off the Avengers. I skipped a whole bunch of stuff because there is quite a nice surprise with the battle in the Old West, so I don't want to spoil it. Again, I'd like you guys to read those comics, so whenever I can, I'll try to avoid spoilers. Although sometimes it's unavoidable. Here you can see the Hellcat cometh. No way not to spoil that. So this is Avengers 144. So we're back in modern times with the Avengers. Here we have a bit of a recap of what happened before. And they're out of their prison, but they're not out of the woods yet. So now they have to try to escape again. And here we have Captain America and Iron Man, who make a pretty big discovery. They discover the costume of the cat. So we get pretty much a recap of the history of the cat. And here we have our friend Captain America, who asks Patsy Walker, would you like to be a superhero? And here we get pretty much a history of Patsy Walker in a couple of pages. And we find out how she learned about Hank McCoy the Beast, which then brought her to the Avengers. And of course, she says yes. Although Captain America realizes that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And we have a fun bit with Iron Man and Cap. This is another fine mess you've gotten us into. Oh, wait a minute, Avenger. As I recall, you thought of it first. And now we get introduced to Hellcat. They didn't want to just use the cat for some reason, and Hellcat does sound a bit cooler than just the cat. Although this is pure fanfic, just finding a magic costume that gives you power out of nowhere, and something that comes straight out of fanfiction. The character of Patsy Walker is funny enough, it was easy enough to overlook that. So we're resolving the whole Wild West thing, and we're pretty much back to the Avengers versus the evil Squadron Sinister, Squadron Supreme. Yeah, I'll stop doing that. It was a fun bit for about 2 seconds. But then the evil bad guys decide to, why have them fight over here? Let us send them to the Earth of the Squadron Supreme. And this leads us to Crisis on Other Earths. If you saw my video about the multiverse, you already know where this is leading us. Although not quite, here we pretty much have a fill-in issue. Actually, it's going to be 2 fill-in issues. Avengers 144. So we have an evil character called the Assassins that has to assassinate the Avengers. I'd give us some art by Don Heck. Tony Isabella was the writer. Obviously, it is something that they came up with last minute, and it was a pretty fun fill-in issue. And Avengers 146 was the second part of that storyline. So we still have the assassin who wants to kill the Avengers, and here we pretty much have a small army of people in order to be able to come up with that issue, probably at the last minute. So once more, the Avengers are under the threat of the evil assassin. So who's going to be killed next? Sadly, you will have to read the comic to find out. So here we're moving on to Avengers 147, Crisis on Other Earth. Basically, DC Comics had their pretty much yearly crisis with the Justice League, meeting the Justice Society of America. Then they had Crisis on Earth 3 meeting the Evil Crime Syndicate of America, Crisis on Earth X, and more. So I guess Steve Englehart and George Perez wanted to be included in that crazy crisis shenanigan. So they came up with Crisis on Other Earth, where the Avengers would be facing off against a counterpart to the Justice League. It was a pretty awesome comic, loved it. And technically the Squadron Supreme were good guys, but somehow they were under the influence of the evil Serpent Crown, which sadly is also starting to influence our poor friend Scarlet Witch somehow. So here we pretty much have the resolution of the Wild West Adventures, and Thor and Moondragon are back in current time. And so is Hawkeye, and as you can see somehow, Two Gun Kid decided to come with them. So here we have the evil Serpent Crown trying to influence Scarlet Witch, which leads Scarlet Witch away from Vision and smack into the hands of Hyperion and the Squadron Supreme. But of course, that doesn't make Vision happy. And here, this is where Vision shows us why he is so formidable. He can be as strong as he can be untouchable. And next we have Avengers 148. So we pretty much have the continuation of our storyline against the Squadron Supreme. And here we have a pretty fun bit, the roll call, which pretty much, if you're not familiar with those characters, if this is somehow the first comic you pick up, like way back when, comics were trying very hard to make sure that if this was your first comic, you had all the information you needed to understand what was going on. So they had these roll calls they would use from time to time. So here you had the roll call for the Squadron Supreme, showing you all the members. You had the roll call for the Avengers, so you knew who was who. Especially in a book like this, where there was a huge cast. At the time, I guess they were not very subtle. The Squadron Supreme even had a satellite, not unlike a certain League of Justice. And of course, we had the recap of what happened before, but it would also be setting up various opponents. So we had Beast and the Hellcat versus Captain Hawk, Tom Thumb, and the Amphibian. And here they were setting up Dr. Spectrum and the Wizard versus Captain America and Iron Man. And it's a bit of a fun bit because way back when, in the Iron Man comics, Dr. Spectrum was one of Iron Man's villains. And way back when in World War II, there was this character called the Wizard, who was a super speedster, and he was an ally of Captain America in World War II. You do have some subtle Easter eggs in those comics from way back when. And next we have Avengers 149. Of course, the Avengers have to come back to their own Earth. We have Thor and Moondragon who tries to get back with the Avengers. Of course, once they reach Avengers Mansion, the Avengers are not there. And now, let the battle begin. So we pretty much have the Avengers fighting against the Brand Corporation. We have the Squadron Supreme showing us that they're actually good guys and they're pretty much denouncing the whole thing. Sadly for the Avengers, there's a huge threat they didn't see coming. But never fear, Thor is here. And we can see that the evil big threat is Orca, the human killer whale. So it led us to a pretty cool fight. Sadly the Avengers are still captured, but we have a pretty cool fight with Thor unleashing the full fury of his power. But of course, the writers kinda had to make Hellcat look good, so she is the one who pretty much wakes up and ends up freeing the Avengers. So once the Avengers are free, it's game over, man. Game over! Which pretty much leads us to the conclusion of this whole saga. So all the Avengers are together, those from the past are now back with those from the present, and those from the present are back from the Squadron Supreme Earth. So now everyone is back and ready for Avengers 150, said. Okay, maybe not. Basically, Avengers will go into another round of recruiting new members, but that will be for a future video. Although we do have a few covers, like here we have a cover for Avengers, Giant-Sized Avengers number 5. And we do have some bits about Foom. It was basically a Marvel fanzine from way back when. I have to admit, I can't recall what FOOM actually stood for. It was something like fans of Marvel, but I'm not sure why there's two O's. And sadly, again, thanks to Kindle, reading some of those pages just not possible on a computer. If you have a tablet, it's not an issue. You can zoom in easily enough with a tablet. So if you want to read those on PC, you probably need a touchscreen. Basically, there was some fun articles about the Division, the Scarlet Witch, and more. Here we have a Kirby cover for a Marvel Treasury Edition. Here we have the back cover. Here we have some promo artwork. So again, you can see some Kirby cover being used here. Some pretty awesome Gil Kane artwork. I loved this Shang-Chi pose and this Iron Fist. That was awesome. Some more promo stuff. So here we have the cover of some Marvel Index by Neil Adams. And here we have the back cover, which looks very, very funky. Some more stuff from the Index. Here we have the original cover of Giant Size number 2. So you can see originally Doctor Doom was included on the cover. At first it was hinted that Doctor Doom was linked to Kang the Conqueror somehow. Although I think as time went by, they gave up on that idea. So here you can see the black and white artwork by Sal Buscema and Joe Staten. Back when I was a kid, the comics we had in my neck of the woods were pretty much black and white like that. So we didn't have the coloring. So I know that a lot of people don't like the coloring of older comics. But at the time when I was reading those comics, I didn't have the coloring, so it did not influence my judgment. I know a lot of people don't like Wonder Man because of the color of his costume. But way back when, I didn't have the color of the costume, so I pretty much fell in love with the character in black and white. And then later on, when we saw what the costume looked like in color, I didn't really care at that point. I really loved the character. And here we have pretty much the back cover of Avengers Epic Collection, Volume 8. So there you go, guys. So this would be a great introduction to Kang the Conqueror, but not just Kang the Conqueror, to a whole bunch of other stuff. It has the introduction of Mantis, it has the origin of the Vision, and more. So you want to read some good classic Avengers stories, this book is for you. Excelsior!